The free world stands strong against aggression in Korea. Ethiopia, a member of the community of free nations, has sent men into the offensive against communism's armed attack. Ethiopia is helping to combat the menace in Korea. It is not strange that Ethiopians should be fighting aggression so far from home, for they have taken their rightful place among the free and independent nations of the world. At the Japanese Peace Conference, Ethiopian delegate Atu Menbera Yahared tells the assembled nations that Ethiopia is happy to participate in signing a treaty which ends a terrible epoch. They deliberated with representatives of other nations, and together they designed a document which offers Japan generosity in defeat, with new hope for a peaceful, prosperous future. Ethiopia's delegates contributed to a successful conference, the wisdom and dignity of an ancient people. Recognition of Ethiopia as a factor on the world scene led to the recent signing of a treaty of friendship and commerce between Ethiopia and the United States. U.S. Ambassador J. Reeves Childs arrives at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Addis Ababa. This is the second treaty between the two governments dealing with general economic relations. The first treaty was signed in 1914. With Minister H.E. Akilu, Mr. Childs signs the expression of goodwill and affirms U.S. respect for the African nation. Later, at the Imperial Palace, His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie receives the ambassador and his staff. The treaty covers taxation, imports and exports, rights to engage in business and other matters affecting citizens or enterprises of both the U.S. and Ethiopia. It also declares basic personal freedoms and rights to be expected by citizens of either country while in each other's land. His Imperial Majesty's signature completes the ceremony. Ethiopia's people and government know full well the need for friends during dangerous years. They have felt the hard heel of aggression, and each year celebrate their liberation from the aggressors. First victim of the dictators, they still have bitter memories of the acts committed against their people. Joy in national freedom is subdued by thought of the tragic 5 years of occupation. Freedom from fear of conquest, Ethiopia has learned, must be founded upon strength. As a consequence, they joined the United Nations organization, a symbol and a force for collective strength, dedicated to the freedom and peaceful prosperity of all nations. By discussion in the UN rather than fighting, 60 nations of the world hope to keep the peace. To back up its intentions of keeping the peace, the UN has taken a strong stand against aggression. Witness corrupt. To Korea, to support the UN cause, Ethiopia has sent a battalion of soldiers. Cheering Koreans greet the men who arrived together with replacements from 3 other nations. The brothers in arms were welcomed personally by the President of Korea, Sigmund Rhee. Fraternizing aboard ship, the men of different nations together were a symbol of the United Nations itself. UN officials and grateful Koreans received the gallant men with flags and flowers. This cause in Korea is a combined effort of 51 nations, over 20 of whom have troops on the spot. Together, they are proving that small nations can have support of larger nations in the fight to maintain their freedom and independence. Ethiopia is one of 2 nations in Africa with troops in Korea. Previously, Ethiopia contributed $100,000 for medical assistance to the men of other nations already in the battle. One chap brought his instrument all the way from home. Ethiopian troops made a smart first impression in Korea. An Ethiopian officer reported the morale of his men was very high and that they were anxious to participate in this operation. All of his men are volunteers, and additional units and replacements are being sent to Korea periodically. Here, the battalion's first campsite is established. This rough Korean terrain is an ideal training ground for an introduction to Korean battle conditions. To make the several United Nations forces a more efficient team, everyone uses the same types of weapons and ammunition. This means getting acquainted with new or slightly different equipment. Hence, the preliminary orientation course for already well-trained soldiers. UN officers said they welcome this effective addition to their fighting strength. They commented that the Ethiopians' previous training at home, where the rugged mountains are similar to those in Korea, would add to the know-how of the United Nations forces. The men accustom themselves to UN signal equipment. The international force must be in constant touch by telephone and radio. This classroom just behind the front lines was a battleground half a year ago. Strong soldiers need good food. While under arms and fighting in Korea, the men have received special dispensations which permit them to eat UN military food rations rather than their regular diet. This man is getting acquainted with his newly acquired accessory called a canteen cup. A tank arrives for integration into the training. Foot soldiers working with tanks are making important gains in Korea. The men get an insight into the effectiveness of the new combat equipment. Time out before going into battle for ceremonies celebrating His Imperial Majesty's birthday. An officer reads a message from the Emperor. Dances reminiscent of happy moments at home are the order of the day. Visiting Americans accept challenges to a friendly bit of sport. The final training period is over. The men collect their equipment and assemble for the trip to the battlefront. Soon they will be fighting alongside other soldiers from the United Nations. With their aid, the communist aggressors will be repulsed. Poised for the attack, Ethiopia's men are in close contact with troops from the other nations. Side by side, they enter the battle. The troops successfully come through their first baptism of fire. Ethiopia, realizing communism's threat to independent peoples, will uphold its contribution to the free world. Ethiopia's faith in collective security has been affirmed. The presence of its men in Korea reinforced the principle of the UN Charter that aggression, to succeed anywhere, is a threat to free peoples everywhere.